Hey, everybody, and welcome to Moms on a Mission. We are affiliated with our good friends at MyPillow. MyPillow makes the best pillows, slippers, sheets, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com and use code MISSION and check out to save up to 66% off. That's mypillow.com, code MISSION. And we'd love to hear from you. So check out our website, momsonamission.net. That's momsonamission.net. We'd also love to hear your comments, your questions, moms@momsonamission.net. That's moms@momsonamission.net. And please follow us on your favorite platform.
Our guest today is a highly successful entrepreneur, aerospace engineer, husband, father of three, and most of us Tulsans know him best as our US Congressman. He has served the 1st District of Oklahoma since being elected in 2018. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome U.S. Representative Kevin Hern to our show today. Hello, Representative Hern. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me
Thanks
today.
for coming.
Well, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
So tell us a bit more about, I learned so much just by reading your bio and didn't realize you were an aerospace engineer, but tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Well, I represent about 800,000 of my closest friends here in the 1st District of Oklahoma, and it's quite an honor. I've been doing this now for 5 years in November since I was sworn in. Never been in politics before. Just help people, I thought were great. That would be great representatives, at every level, state level, local level, and the federal level. And in 2017, when the seat came open, when Congressman Bridenstine became the NASA administrator nominee, I worked to win the seat and won. And as the old saying goes, I caught the car, and here we are. It's different. It's really important to understand how our government works, and it's really been good to engage the people in the 1st District.
Well, we've been glad to have you here. We like Bridenstine, but we love having another conservative in that seat.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Yes.
So today we're going to focus a lot of our time on education. So tell us about your own education and what were the highlights and challenges?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 5. I'm the only one in my family that ever went to college. And I'm also I'm the oldest, like I said, of 5, and none of my brother and sister graduated high school. Grew up in the Ozark Mountains. And so I was just meeting with some folks at Oklahoma State University this morning. And I was talking about how important it is to get education, get an education. I went to a career tech, a vo-tech in high school, learned how to be a draftsman, draw blueprints, use that to help pay my way through engineering school. I waited 2 years after graduation of high school to go to college, and then 10 years later got an MBA. But I will tell you, for everybody out there, 4-year colleges aren't always the thing you should be doing. You should be, so it's hard for somebody that's never had anybody to be an example for them to go through school. And so we see a lot of people today, even today, that are 1st generation university students, that nobody in their family ever went to a college. And I know for some that's hard to believe, but when you don't have that pathway, sometimes you make mistakes on your degree, and it's very expensive to go to school.
Yes.
You end up with a lot of school debt, and you're trying to figure out how to pay for that and get a good job. So I want to be an example for technical education, for waiting after you graduate high school to understand what you want to do, so that when you go into college, you're on a mission. And then when you get out, you don't necessarily have to go right to a graduate school. You can wait a few years. I waited a decade, and it was always with a purpose. And it really separated me from my siblings who grew up much in the same environment that I did.
Well, I love that you shared that, because I think so many of us as parents and even as students, we get on this linear path where it's like, I went to high school and then I'm going to go to college and then I'm going to go to grad school and then I'm going to go here and there. And, it's fine to go off a little bit. You learn something in those experiences as working working a job and then going back to do your MBA, or, taking a year off to think about exactly what you want to do after high school, rather than just jumping into a school that when you don't know what you want to do and you waste your parents.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know what you want to do, and a couple of years would kind of settle you and help get focused.
I actually think that we as parents are sort of sometimes, while we're the best cheerleaders for our kids, we're also sometimes a detriment to what they do. And, we just we don't want our kids to make the mistakes that we did or have to experience the difficulties we did. So we try to protect them from that. And sometimes we get in the way of them taking their own pathway. And I always tell people, I say, the reason that a lot of kids today are not going to career techs and getting a skill that they can actually go to work with the day after they graduate high school or that particular career tech is because of parents. because the kids' minds are blank minds. They're being influenced by parents and their
Right.
peers. And so if we can encourage them to be productive, so later in life, when we're not around as their parents, whenever that may be, that they have a skill set that they can always fall back on and not have to depend on the federal government.
I love that. And I heard a lady a few years back, a homeschool mom, talking about encouraging your kids, even if they are great at, going to a 4-year school and they know what they want to do, to have a technical side too, so that they have like a double duo, they can do both. So sometimes when the economy doesn't work for their particular field, they can always go back to plumbing, electrical, those
They're
kinds
not
of things.
stuck.
And I love that. I wish I had a skill like that.
You do. You look what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
You're going to be a radio host. Did you know that?
That's a good point.
Surprise.
Congressman. Okay, well, turning our attention to this is kind of education week around here. A lot of kids are going back to school. We're highlighting some things. We just had the privilege of having Superintendent Ryan Walters on the show. But kind of talking.
Great friend.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We feel like he's a friend of Moms on a Mission as well, and really respect the work that he's doing. A lot of hard work going on in the state. But kind of going to the federal side of things a little bit. And we've learned from our a book that and hopefully you're familiar with as well, as Battle for the American Mind by Pete Hegseth. It came out last year. And he talked in the book about how the federal government is spending over $700 billion a year on education. And that's more than, defense spending and all kinds. I can't remember exactly what it said, but you can read it in the book. But just kind of wanted to ask you, where is that money going? And are you in favor of keeping the U.S. Department of Education?
Well, so I graduated high school in 1980, which is the year that the Department of Education was stood up.
Jimmy
and funded.
Carter.
Yep. So it was for a purpose. I actually went through the Heritage Foundation when I was running for office, and they had these 20-minute segments. And I specifically asked, I was a slow learner on the Department of Education, so I had to have special help on that because I couldn't understand why we even have it. Because I'm a person that believes education should be done at the local level. I think that parents and I think that students and teachers and administrators should come together with their community to have an exceptional public school experience. My wife and I went to public schools over in Arkansas. And really, when I look at the slide of education, it happened around the early 80s. It was one of Ronald Reagan's biggest failures. He would admit to this. He tried to stop the Department of Education, couldn't get bureaucrats out of the way, Congress included, and it was being ran by Democrats at that time. And so here we are today. We have this bloated bureaucracy of the Department of Education at the federal level, and they're mandating this insane things. It used to be that the education department was in the House or the Health, Education, and Welfare. So it's all encompassing about a person's mental health, physical health, and social health. And then they started dividing this up because they wanted to concentrate. I believe Democrats wanted to concentrate on indoctrinating our kids to being independent of your parents, being able to sue your parents, to what we see today, which is, schools are keeping really critical information from parents, like, sexual orientation of children and how do you believe, religiously, and all these different things. And there became such a detachment from parenting from children that now today parents have realized, I think it started in Virginia with Governor Youngkin's race, that when Merrick Garland called parents who are engaged in school boards, domestic terrorists, I think that was an eye-opening opportunity for both Republicans and Democrats, and quite frankly, those people who didn't care about politics, to say, we've got to get re-engaged, and the pendulum has swung back in our favor. And we're seeing parents now engaged at every level. I say often that I never knew when the Tulsa School Board ever occurred because it was never covered until Elena Ashley got on there. Now every one of them are being covered.
Yes.
That's good because we get to see what's going on.
Yeah, she's doing a fantastic
She
job.
is, and she's taken a lot of heat.
Yeah.
But she has a lot of support. And I think you're right. Just more people knowing when the meetings are and getting engaged. It's one, I guess, I hate to say it, but it's one good thing that came out of COVID. I think people were like, I see this going on. We're doing this at home now with our schoolwork online, and I don't like it. And I'm going to say something.
Parents knew what was going on in the classroom.
No, and we trusted.
And that's one thing when we talked to Superintendent Walters about, is that when he was a teacher, it was all about transparency and partnership with the parents. Whereas now it's more about indoctrination and pushing the parents outside the classroom because the parents are in the way. And if they can remove the parents, then they can indoctrinate and brainwash the kids and not have critical thinking, not teach critical thinking, but teach them how to think I mean, not what to think and not how to think.
Well, I think what you all are doing, Moms for Liberty, a lot of different groups, Jenny White's group talking about books, and there's so many different groups that are involved with her. But she came to my office back, I think in November or December. It was only like 30 minutes set aside for her. And an hour and 20 minutes into the conversation, I said, I could sit here the rest of the day and get more infuriated by what I'm hearing that are in our libraries across our schools in Oklahoma. What's known throughout the nation is to be a very conservative state. Can you imagine like libraries in California and New York, what those look like? And to see the work that she's done and others for years upon years going across and making notes of these. And I'm sitting there in my mind, I grew up in a small school in Arkansas, the town had about 300 people. And we'd go to libraries and I'd read a lot, about Huckleberry Finn and, Wild Bill Hickok. And I see, students my age then, sixth graders are reading about, sexual orientation and, incest and rape. It's just no wonder that, kids are so messed up today.
Yeah. And it's part of the plan. It's not accidental. What's happening. That's what I find so incredible when you think about it, is that how in lockstep the left is and how this has gone on for years. Yeah. And now we're just seeing the fruit of their labor, that when you see them burning the American flag or when you see statues toppled over, it didn't just happen. I mean, this was 100-year plan, and now you're seeing the fruit of their labor.
Well, I think I think they're actually Democrat people who vote Democrat that are getting engaged, and they thought that Republicans were crazy and all this, and they're seeing what's happened to their children. It's the old saying, it's kind of the mama bear thing, right?
Yes.
And we know that whole movement across America. And if you start messing with my kids, you can do anything. Don't mess with my kids.
That's right. Yeah. So are you saying what you're seeing Democrats as well getting upset about these issues?
Oh, sure.
I am glad to hear that.
Well, I think if you look at Virginia, there's no way that Glenn Youngkin would ever won just on Republican votes. There was
such a good point.
Yeah, because that state is becoming so blue. And yet a guy that was a business guy, very wealthy business guy who started the Carlyle Group with a Democrat who's a billionaire. And he won this, a first-time politician, because Democrats crossed over because they said enough is enough.
Yeah, and we've seen that. We've interviewed Jennifer Say. She got fired from Levi's. Same situation. She's the Democrat. I think now she's an independent. But Julie and I talk about quite a bit on here the difference between liberals and progressives. And I think what you're seeing is those liberal Democrats, true liberals coming over, because this just doesn't make sense. And it's just destroying our nation. And
it's a relief to see this happening. And because really, this education should not be a political something to be fighting about politically. And we shouldn't, and that polarization that I feel like sometimes there's a puppeteer, pulling us from one side to the other. So we won't get anything done. Mm-hmm. And then the kids suffer and our country suffers. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, I think, what's interesting about Washington, D.C. is how people in power want to stay in power and make sure that nobody else gets in power. Yes. And that's the whole movement of the socialist Democrat we've got the power now. We're going to keep it instead of having a true Republican virtue, which is a limited government, having government limited in your life. And that means you have to have more local control, not more federal control. And as you see right now, just the Department of Education alone last year was over $100 billion. Just
that department.
That's unbelievable.
$100 billion.
Yeah. And where is that money going? I mean, where is it primarily?
So you can look at all the line items, but once it leaves there, you never know.
We don't know.
Because
it's just like,
when you look at local level, some of the demands that require, I'll give you a really great example. When you have local schools and you have 3 or 4 elementary schools, and one of those get deemed as, underperforming, and those get posted,
right?
Then if you're a parent, you say, well, my little Johnny's not going to that school because I know he's not a C student. I'm going to go one of these A or B. And so they move and they make the school worse because you take, better. And they only have, sometimes in an urban area, you don't have to move across the street and you're another school district. So a lot of these schools get hurt by some of the requirements on these federal dollars where, and you have schools in Oklahoma as an example that, I don't know if they still do this, but just a few years ago, they were being benchmarked against like schools in Montana or in California. And my narrative is why don't we benchmark against really good school districts in our own state that are scoring well? Because then you can have collaboration. You're working under the state laws that are the same. You don't have to worry about, well, we're having a disagreement over the state laws in Montana versus Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And so we need to do more of this internal benchmarking. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're continuing to go backwards as a nation over the last 40 years against our peers or our competitors, if you will, around the world. our state's going backwards. And, when you see right now in Tulsa School District is really troubling.
Well, I just love that you came from a business side of things, and you're an entrepreneur, a very successful one. And you of all people would know, like, nowhere in the world could you get a job and perform so horribly and yet keep your job and get a raise. I mean, you know what I mean? That's illogical. I mean, you couldn't run a business that way, but yet that's what we're doing with our Tulsa public schools and in education.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And I know there are a lot of people who are trying to protect the schools, and say, well, we're going to work this out, but it's continuing to get worse. We've got to sit down and have a conversation about what we're really teaching. Is it something that's making our helping our kids become more competitive? We know. I learned this when I was campaigning for the first race, is that you could go and look at the incarceration rate in our state based on how well somebody read at third grade.
Wow.
And so if we have people reading at a higher rate down the road, there's a great chance there'll be less incarceration. And so I've actually read another story about that this week in another state. So that is sort of the benchmark. So when they're doing the Ohio testing or whatever, is that third grade reading level is so big of how a future of a child's going to go with all things being equal.
Yeah, so important. And kind of goes right into our next question, because parents, need to be involved. They need to know about their, the test scores of the school, the proficiency of their own child's, reading and arithmetic and writing, just sticking with those basics. They need to be involved in knowing what the curriculum is. I know Miriam and I experienced some curriculum issues and really wanted to know what was being taught as a parent, having the right to do that. And I know that there was a Parent Bill of Rights that was passed through Congress earlier this year. I didn't really, follow it too far, but could you elaborate more on that? What
Sure.
that was and what's happened to that bill?
Yeah, so it's HR 5 that was passed by Republicans. I don't think there was any Democrats supported it. That's really pretty sad when you look at what it did. It gave parents the right to know what curriculum was being taught in school. It gave them the right to have 2 meetings a year with administrators and teachers to see how their child is progressing. It gave them a right to know what's in the library. It gave them a right to know that for the school to know that they're the parent, not the school. And if a child has a gender affirming conversation, whatever that really is, that conversation should be with the parent, not just kept away from the parent. So like we saw the educator, I think Tapia out in California.
Yes, we had her on. Yeah.
So, when you have something like that going on, it's really pretty scary to think about all the pressures on our kids. And so this was about, and then you mentioned this earlier, but I'm kind of an older guy, and you went in a different era, but your parents were, but they knew that when you went to school that you were protected and that you were in an environment of learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And you were taught social skills, like you don't pick on somebody else or things like that. Never in their wildest imagination, my mom or dad would have thought that somebody was going to teach me that if I think I'm a girl one day, I could be a girl, or, if a girl thought she wanted to be a boy. Those things were just foreign to them. And today, parents are working, a lot of single parents today, and they're working really hard. And now they're fearful that their child is going to school and they're going to lose their child because administrators in schools are hiding things from them. And that is very difficult for a parent today. And if you're in a minority status, that's even more difficult because there's so many other pressures, social and societal pressures on their kids. To see that happening, it's devastating for children and their ability to learn to compete in the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's all by design. I keep going back to the fact that they don't want parents' involvement, but yet they're very willing to take our money.
That is,
what kind of business, again, I go back to running a business, what kind of business or investment you would invest your money, but yet they take your money, but you have no say so in how your money is spent. I mean, it's illogical to me.
Well, I think that's why it's important to see what the state legislators have done here with parent choice. And I don't like to call it school choice, because you're not doing it because you want to change schools. There's no parent. I think for Democrats to say that, that we're doing it for school choice, that's just wrong thinking. It's about parents trying to find a place where their kids can learn and being an environment of learning and not being taught things that don't really affect their ability to compete on a global basis. Talking to you about your sexual thoughts for the moment doesn't help you compete around the rest of the world. And we're getting just eaten alive, if you will, on the global stage when we're trying to compete with folks who want to move into the technical world and compete with China,
Right.
who is doing everything they can to indoctrinate our kids that China's great and you should be like Chinese, not like Americans. So,
Well, look at their TikTok. Their TikTok in China is educational, where the TikTok in the United States is just garbage and dumbs our kids down.
Mhm.
And it's that alone should show you, like, they know what they're doing. I mean, this is a plan that they are.
well, and I
utilizing.
think all America that watched the gentleman, the CEO of TikTok, come before Congress.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you saw what he said, you're owned by a parent company where everywhere else except the United States, you turn all those things off. You block the ability for, kids to have really bad things put before them. But in the United States, you allow that to happen. And he never would answer that question about
Oh,
why
yeah,
they
he
allow
was
it.
skirting around that.
It was all, and you can just see them squirming. It's all part of the agenda.
It is.
Well, how about the Protect Women's and Girls in Sports Act? We know states are passing these bills, including our own state of Oklahoma, but why is the federal act important for schools and parents across the country?
Well, I think it goes, ultimately where we want to go is the federal funding. And it's always about the dollars on the federal side and the regulatory issues. But I had the chance back 6 or 7 months ago to meet Riley Gaines and speak at a small event that we had for her. And obviously she's been engaged with a lot of folks, been invited a lot of places. I think you all have talked to her.
Yeah.
And she's really impressive. And I remember specifically just thinking, at that time she was 21. And I said, it's amazing when you have somebody at this age that's making such a statement on an issue that's so important to the future of America. We should have more people stand up. And, she's crisscrossed the United States.
Yes.
And she has made it such an important thing. I don't know if you know who Ennis Cantor Freedom is, but he's an African-American gentleman, played NBA and got really just basically cast aside because of his comments on China. And he recently, I think it was actually yesterday, made a comment. He says, maybe if I put a wig on, I could play in the WNBA and it'd be okay. He said, is that really what it's going to
I
take?
wish you would, actually.
I know. I wish you would too.
Yeah, let's just do
Let's
this.
shake
Do it
things
right.
up. Let's shake it up.
I don't think we're going to have to encourage you much because I think this is a guy who would do that just to make a statement that, this is how ludicrous this really is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I and Riley is such a bright, sunshiny person and so eloquent and has really taken this topic and highlighted it and shared her story. And I think as parents, I mean, we really need, I don't always I don't always want the government involved in my life. I like limited government as well. But on some of these issues, like protecting women's sports, because it's so ludicrous, it's so backwards, from what we had growing up. Like I grew up probably about the same time you did. And I'm like, this is so foreign to me that I want a little protection and help.
Yeah.
So how was that received in Washington, D.C.? Probably not so well.
No, this whole thing about, guys playing in women's sports and guys going into women's locker rooms under the notion that they somehow believe in their mind that they're females. It's just, I can tell you from a Republican standpoint, we think it's a bunch of hokey hogwash propaganda. We just think it's a way for people to, I think ultimately you're going to see a lot of sexual predators in this area.
Well, they've already seen that in some schools.
Yeah.
It's really pretty sad that, I ask, because I came up through kind of the era of, obviously I was younger, but, the feminist movement to get Title IX for schools. So there's equality in sports or funding in sports for high schools and others in college. Where are these people? Where are these people today? And then I read today before coming over here, they're around, but now they have sort of rationalized in their mind that a trans woman is a woman and a trans girl is a girl. And I guess if you're a real woman or real girl competing, you just have nobody. You just have Republicans. And so now they've just kept narrowing. And I think it's really what we've seen like in the South over the last 30, 40 years, that the Democrat Party continues to move away from its people. To get so radicalized and so much so that even in Congress, they will tell you to they'll say, call me a socialist Democrat. So the Democrats are just fewer and fewer. And I can share this with you because when I came in Congress, just 2019, sort of my first full term, this is when we had the three progressives. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. Those were the only three progressives in the House. Nobody else identified as a socialist Democrat. On the Senate, you had Bernie Sanders. Today, there are over 100 of the 212 Democrats that identify themselves as progressive socialist Democrats
That's scary.
in 4 years.
In 4 years.
Yeah.
That really makes it.
Well, look at Joe
scary.
Biden.
Oh.
You know, as a senator, you know, this was appalling to him. And today,
Mhm.
you know, he's signing every one of these bills,
Oh,
calling, you know, us extremists on the Republican side
Mhm.
because we want traditional families.
And he spoke out against all this. And I remember when he came into office, they were saying, you know, I wonder how far the progressives are going to be able to push him, because this was not who
Pretty
he
darn
naturally
far.
was. They had to push him into this.
Oh yeah, I remember the videos of him and Obama talking about, you know, same-sex marriage, and we didn't even get this far yet, but they would have been opposed to that back in, you know,
Oh.
2008 because they wanted votes. But gosh, he was sure believable back then. But man, the pressure, the money, follow the money.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that before the show. I mean, it seems like it's always all about the money, you
Mhm.
know?
It is, and it's unfortunate that you have, you know, so these puppet masters out there that are, you know, pushing him and pulling him, and you know, and also the other folks underneath it. Because what I've learned since being in Congress, it's really the underlying money
Mhm.
and the folks that are trying to push an agenda. And there's actually this kind of an agenda of like a one world order, both economically, you know, financially. I sit on Ways and Means, and we're dealing with international tax code, where the current administration is wanting to have one tax code for the entire world.
Oh,
And basically you lose all this 247 years of working and fighting and having wars to protect our freedom and the right to votes are just given away. And that's what's happening right now. That's the fight we have on our hands. That's why it's so critical this next election that we keep the House, win the Senate, and get the White House back to stop this nonsense.
and it's
And
coming
I
up.
just have to say that, you know, if you would have asked me what the World Economic Forum was 5 years ago, I would have been like, what is that? Or Klaus Schwab or the Great Reset or any of that. But now, and then you were a conspiracy theorist if you thought that, you know, even 3 or 4 years ago. But now it's kind of like common knowledge, like,
Yeah.
you know, this one world order and the tax code, and then even the money, the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. I mean, you're hearing these things on mainstream media, and that's what's so interesting.
Well, what we have to do differently than we've done historically, when Republicans have taken back the House, they've never gone and taken any of the ground back that they lost.
Mhm.
They've just said, okay, we give it up. We've acknowledged we lost that. Now we're going to go do our thing. The Democrats have won these incremental battles. They're perfectly okay with where they'll be perfectly okay to lose next year, because they know that Republicans leadership has never gone and taken anything back. We've got to take back the ground that we've lost. When Biden and the administration and other Democrats call us extrema MAGA people, we need to expand what MAGA is, which make America great again. Is anybody on the Democrat Party doesn't want to make America great again?
Right.
But MAGA, nobody wants to expound on that. So, you know, we have to go back and take some ground back. So we can't have a plateau. We have to actually have a dip going back to where we were. We had full employment. We weren't talking about this nonsense. We had less regulation. And just in 2.5 years, this president has put more regulation on in his 2.5 years than President Trump, President Obama, or President Bush in that same period. So it's a bigger government. You hear about 30 by 30, you hear about all these 15-minute cities, all these kind of
Yes.
things. These are a direct attack on what makes America great, which are the liberties and freedoms that we have that were guaranteed to us under the Constitution. So we have to fight for those. Ronald Reagan said it best. It's only one generation away from being
Yeah.
lost. It's not
Right.
given to us. We have to fight. And this is a fight that you all are in.
Yeah, we're in
Yeah.
the fight.
We are.
I'm so glad you brought those things up. And as we head into 2024, I guess it's maybe one of our last questions, but I mean, what would you like us to do in the first district? How can we help get more Republicans in, whether that's around in Oklahoma or across the nation? What do you think is critical?
Yeah, I think this right here is this particular issue on children and children's education, the way it's being brought to the forefront with Superintendent Walters and others is really I think is a flashpoint to unite Republicans. And I think
Okay.
moderate, even Democrats are just about a little bit left of center to re-engage, you know, grandparents that are traditional hardcore voters that are, you know, kids are older now, sometimes parents, a lot of things going on, they forget to vote, but grandparents
Right.
don't. And kind of jostle the grandparents a little bit. They're in their 50s and 60s and say, hey, this is about your grandkid
Mhm.
and their kids. This is not something that's going to go away if you don't fight for it.
And I think that's what people want to do, is to stick their head in the sand. You know, when is Trump getting back in office and not have to do anything? And one thing I'm very proud that Tulsa has done is start the Tulsa Classical Academy and have the first, charter school like this and with classical education at the helm. And my husband and I are very happy to support them and support them financially. And I think there are things like that parents can do and get behind. Even if your kid doesn't go there, this is good for Tulsa.
Yes.
This is good for Oklahoma, because the information that they're learning is not poison. It's true primary sourced information that doesn't teach kids what to think, but teaches them how to think.
Well, I think when you look at Tulsa Classical Academy, there are a lot of people involved. My wife and I are involved. I don't have any kids or grandkids
Same.
in school.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. I had dinner with a gentleman last night who has 3 grandkids going there. He just learned about it. Will be a big supporter of the school. I think, there's a lot of interest in having one in Oklahoma City and Edmond area. I think that's going to happen rather quickly. I'm very involved at Hillsdale on a national level. So I think this is great, but I think really more importantly, where you all can help. And this has never happened before. This is what's new about this cycle that's never happened before. We have Moms on a Mission. We have Moms for Liberty. We have Ladies for Liberty. I think the more women we can get involved in this, the more moms, the grandmothers we can get involved, the more we're going to take this back. But before, it's just been a few politicians yelling about it or talking heads on TV. But you all are doing this. I think it's so impactful. I don't think you know how impactful it is, or you probably do, or you wouldn't continue doing it, but it's very impactful. Keep doing it.
Well, we thank you so much, Congressman Hern, for being here and for that encouragement. And we want to encourage other moms out there. They can do this too across the nation. We need, as Miriam always says, to lock arms with people all across the nation. And if you need some moral support, you can reach out to us at momsonamission.net or moms@momsonamission.net. And we want to hear from you, your comments, your questions. We're excited about going into 2024. I think we have momentum. I think that we have a lot to be, fighting for. Mm-hmm. And as we've said on our show plenty of times, we're not giving up. We're going to fight back harder. We're going to educate, awake, and activate. So please follow us on your favorite platform. And thanks so much for joining us today. Moms on a Mission is excited to partner with our friends at MyPillow. According to sleep experts and sleephealth.org, over 50 million Americans struggle to get a good night's rest. That's where MyPillow comes in. They make the best pillows, sheets, mattresses, and mattress toppers. Several years ago, I was having trouble falling and staying asleep due to neck and shoulder pain. Luckily, I heard an ad about MyPillow and decided to give it a try. After 3 or 4 days, I really began to feel a difference. I was sleeping better and my neck and shoulders felt so much better. MyPillow really does help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. Moms on a Mission wants you to get a great night's rest too. Go to mypillow.com right now and use the promo code MISSION for up to 66% off your purchase. MyPillow products are made in America and have a 60-day money-back guarantee and lifetime warranty. Remember, go to mypillow.com, put in the special code MISSION for your special Moms on a Mission discount. Thank you and God bless.
Hey guys, it's Moms on a Mission here. Are you worried about your financial stability and protecting the money for which you work so hard? The problem is stock market volatility and inflation. You may be wondering what you can do to preserve your family's wealth. We at Moms on a Mission encourage you to reach out to our friend Andrew Sorcini with Beverly Hills Precious Metals. Andrew is the expert in educating you to help you find the right balance of gold and silver for your family portfolio. He made it so easy for me to add precious metals to my financial investments. I simply mailed a check to Beverly Hills Precious Metals and my silver showed up on my doorstep a few days later. It was so easy. Go to bh-pm.com to save a little money and tell them that Moms on a Mission sent you. That's bh-pm.com. Don't wait. Protect your wealth today by going to bh-pm.com and tell them that Moms on a Mission sent you.